Okay, this talk is entitled Jurassic Park and the Bible. It's an interesting topic for a lot of people. Our ministry is called the Virtual Reality Bible Museum, and so we go out to like state fairs, county fairs, we set up our booth, and we set up the virtual reality, and then people can tour different Bible scenes. A lot of you have seen it downstairs already. I know a lot of the kids have been down there. And so we've been taking this out to the public, and it's interesting seeing people's reaction. They see the Bible, and then they see the dinosaurs, and they're like, how does these fit together? Because dinosaurs have always been used kind of as the icon of evolution, and people don't understand, like, how can you put that with the Bible? So that's kind of what the talk is about to some degree. So if anybody wants to, we have the virtual reality set up downstairs, or not downstairs, it's in the same level here, I guess, in the vendor hall. And so you can come and you can tour all these different scenes that we have and be able to see the Bible kind of come alive. And we travel all over with it. We just came back from Florida. We travel around, so if anybody wants us to come to like a homeschool group or something like that, we can come with the virtual reality, with the Virtual Bible Museum. We also have like different displays of fossils and dinosaur bones, like real life ones too. And we can do workshops and different things. So if anybody wants us to come do that kind of thing, there's our contact information. So hopefully my slides will work okay here. So Jurassic Park and the Bible. So we've all seen the dinosaur videos, animations, whether it's a documentary on the Nature Channel or whether it's Jurassic Park. Whatever it is, there's always these terrifying, roaring, vicious dinosaurs, especially the T-Rex. We see these everywhere. We see the T-Rex kind of has this distinctive roar, and the ground shakes and everything. So that's the way the movies and the animations portray the dinosaurs, and especially the T-Rex. But there's some new research that came out recently that dinosaurs probably didn't even roar, which is kind of a surprise because that's what we're used to seeing everywhere. But the scientists say that they might have growled like a crocodile or honked like a goose. Can you imagine a dinosaur going around honking like a goose? So we don't really know for sure, but comparing dinosaurs to modern creatures, alligators, crocodiles, things like that, they're fairly similar type of reptiles, and they don't make much noise at all. They make a very low rumbling growl sometimes, but even that's pretty rare. You can go listen to it on YouTube to hear what they sound like. But most lizards don't make much sound at all. Even the big ones like alligators, their sound isn't very loud. It's not a ground-shaking roar like we see the dinosaurs making. Even we have the king of beasts, the lions, and they can roar. They can make a pretty big roar, but it's still not. They don't do it all the time. Most of the time, they lay in the sun. A lot of times, when you see a dinosaur animation, the dinosaurs are always fighting. Like that's almost universally. Every time you see some dinosaur in a movie or anywhere, it's vicious, it's fighting, they're tearing each other apart. But creatures don't do that. They don't typically act like that. Even lions, they can roar, but they don't roar all the time. They don't usually roar when they're chasing prey. They're quiet most of the time, and they will roar once in a while. We have some pretty scary looking lizards even nowadays, but I don't know if these kind of lizards even make any noise. They probably make some little. I think I've heard some lizards chirping before. I'm not sure about these guys, what sound they make. So that's one of the kind of fallacies of the movies and the way dinosaurs are portrayed nowadays. Another one is that you see the velociraptors, that they're big, not quite as big as this picture is showing them, but in the movies they're big, they're like that tall or something. And that's actually not accurate either. A lot of you probably have heard this before, that the velociraptors are actually fairly small. They're about the size of a turkey. They're not like what Jurassic Park portrayed them to be. And there's a lot of things that are portrayed like them hunting in packs and different things like that, that it's speculation, it's theory, but there's all they find is the bones, so they don't know how these creatures actually lived or acted or anything. All they have is the bones. They can kind of reconstruct what they looked like, probably. So I'm going to tell you a story now, and this is an actual true story. We can kind of piece it together. So there was, you can imagine a jungle. We don't know for sure if it was a jungle, but some kind of countryside before the flood times. And there's a creature called a protoceratops, and it's wandering along, and a velociraptor sees it, and the velociraptor sneaks up on it and attacks the protoceratops, and they're fighting. The protoceratops manages to get the velociraptor's arm in its mouth, and so it's clamped down on the velociraptor's arm, and they're fighting. And then this is apparently while the flood is happening, and a big tsunami wave from the flood comes in, and it totally buries the velociraptor and the protoceratops in the ground in the midst of their fight. This is an actual fossil that they found. I think this is a recreation. This isn't the actual one, but they actually found the fossil of the velociraptor and the protoceratops with the velociraptor's arm in the protoceratops' mouth. They just found another one recently. It was, I think, a triceratops and possibly, I can't remember. That one has not actually been released to the public yet. They're getting ready to announce it, so it's not actually been announced yet, but it's a very similar type of fossil to this one here of two other types of dinosaurs. So there's a lot of fossils like this that we find, and we can ask the question, did this happen over a long period of time that these fossils were buried, or was it really quickly? Obviously the answer is it had to be really quickly, because they were buried while they were fighting. It had to be some major catastrophe that instantly buried them. And that's what we find with a lot of the fossils, is that they show indications of being buried very rapidly. Evolution says that a lot of these things happen very slowly over many, many thousands of years, billions of years, and the evidence actually shows that it was very rapid. A lot of the fossils show that they couldn't have been buried slowly, because typically if you see a dead animal laying on top of the ground, it's not long before the scavengers tear it apart, the bones get scattered or eaten or decay into the ground. So in order for fossils to form, they have to be buried quickly. So the question is, are there dinosaurs in the Bible? This is a question a lot of people want to know about. And it's very possible that there are dinosaurs described in the Bible. The book of Job is considered to be one of the oldest books in the Bible. And in the book of Job, it talks about two creatures. The first one's called the behemoth. And this is the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon definition for the word behemoth. And it means a very large creature, and they say perhaps an extinct dinosaur. A diplodocus or brachiosaurus. The exact meaning is unknown. And then it says some translate as elephant or hippopotamus. But from the description in Job 40:15-24, that is patently absurd. So this is where the behemoth description is found, if you want to look that up. So we're just going to read some of that and go through and see what the description says. See if it could match diplodocus or a brachiosaurus like it's suggesting here. So it starts out, it says, describing behemoth, it says, "Behold now, behemoth, which I made with thee." So God is saying, I made this creature. I'm the creator of this creature. "He eateth grass as an ox. Behold, his strength is in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly." Dinosaurs had very strong muscles. "He moves his tail like a cedar tree. The sinews of his stones or his thighs are wrapped together." A lot of the movies and stuff, you see the dinosaur, the big diplodocus or different sauropods, they use they use their tail as a whip if another dinosaur is trying to attack them. And that's actually based on what lizards do nowadays. I was living in Puerto Rico, and my dog chased a big iguana. It was like about that long, into my garage, and the iguana was sitting there in the garage, and the dog tried to walk up to the iguana, and it swung its tail around really, really fast, like a whip, and tried to hit the dog with it. So it's very possible that the dinosaurs did do that kind of thing. So Job describes this creature moves his tail like a cedar. So here's some cedar trees. They're pretty significant trees. So here's the last sentence of that from Brown Driver Briggs lexicon, that definition. That some people interpret this as an elephant or hippopotamus. They think that that's what behemoth is. Here is an elephant's tail. Does that look much like a cedar tree? Looks like a rope, maybe. Here is a hippopotamus's tail. That doesn't look like anything hardly. But here's the sauropod's tail. That definitely could fit a cedar tree pretty well. And it goes on to say his bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. Here's a picture of my wife standing next to, I think that might have been a Brachiosaurus leg. I can't remember for sure which sauropod that was, but you can see what size it is compared to her standing there. Their bones are huge. So we've got a piece of one of them, probably from one of the long-necked dinosaurs, down on the table, and each bone is like that big around. So the description of them being like iron and bronze, that fits pretty well. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. So it's saying God is more powerful than this creature. God is trying to describe to Job his power and his might. And he's saying, I created the mightiest creature you know on the earth, the biggest, mightiest creature. I'm more powerful than that creature. Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of the field play. He lieth under the shade trees, in the covert of the reed and the fens. It's describing different kinds of plants. The shade trees cover him with their shadows. The willows of the brook compass him about. So this is the kind of habitat that the sauropods lived in. It says, behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. A lot of times you see the sauropod dinosaurs with water. A lot of times they're walking in the water. Scientists used to think that they only lived in water because their bodies were so heavy and their heads were so big that they thought they couldn't live in regular gravity, like they'd be too heavy. But they found out now they could have lived on land just fine too. But typically they do associate them with water. Job goes on and says, he taketh it with his eyes, his nose pierceth through snares. So basically, there's no snare, no trap that you could set to catch this creature. It would just push its face right through it and escape. So all these things would match sauropod dinosaur really well. There's no other creature that we have nowadays that has a tail like a cedar tree, bones like iron and brass, different things like that, but it does match the sauropod dinosaurs really well. The next creature described in the book of Job is Leviathan. And it says, canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Obviously, these are rhetorical questions like, no, obviously nobody could do this. It says, canst thou put a hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? They used to make fish hooks out of thorns. So it's saying, no fish hook is big enough to catch this creature. Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? Obviously, the answer to all these questions is no. Nobody could do this. Nobody's got a spear big enough or powerful enough to kill this creature. It says, lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do it no more. So if you try to attack this creature, you'll never do that again. That's kind of the idea. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. So even the mightiest man, just at the sight of this creature, is terrified. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he that can stand before me? So God is saying nobody is so fierce to attack this creature that I created, and yet I'm more powerful. I'm the creator of this creature. He's describing kind of the most scary creature on the earth to Job, the scariest creature they knew at that time. And we don't know exactly what kind of creature this was, but it definitely sounds like some kind of a dinosaur-type creature. Who can open the doors of his mouth? Its teeth all around are fearsome. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another, they clasp each other and cannot be separated. Its snorting throws out flashes of light, its eyes are like the red glow of dawn. That's getting kind of scary sounding. Red eyes. Out of his mouth goeth flames, sparks of fire shoot forth. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. So this is getting kind of startling description. we have basically some kind of fire-breathing creature here. I mean, this is the Bible describing this. This isn't some mythological imagination of a human. This is God saying, I'm the one who created this creature, and he's describing it as a fire-breathing creature of some kind. And we might think that that's pretty strange to find that in the Bible, but it's interesting that all through history, all over the world, different nations all have stories of fire-breathing dragons. All over the world, there's stories of dragons, and they describe them in different ways, but a lot of times they breathe fire. And so if all these different nations scattered all across the world have these stories of fire-breathing creatures, it kind of makes us wonder, wasn't there some source for this? Like, isn't there some reality behind these stories? The word dinosaur didn't exist until after 1841. It was invented by the British scientist Richard Owens. He's the one that first invented the word dinosaur, which means terrible lizard. So before that time, all they had was the word dragon. They didn't have the word dinosaur. The King James Bible uses the word dragon 34 times. It uses it for different types of creatures. Sometimes it's describing snakes. Sometimes it's describing some other kind of creature that sounds like something that we would see in mythology, but it may not be mythology. Actually, it's probably very likely it's not mythology. We have God created fireflies. They mix two different kinds of chemicals inside their bodies. They're a little tiny bug like that, but they mix two chemicals and they create light, kind of like the light sticks that you break. And when you break them, the chemicals mix and they create light. Well, the fireflies can do that just by themselves. They don't need a light stick. God made bombardier beetles, where they mix two chemicals together and it turns into this fiery hot liquid that shoots out of their body. So it's not at all strange to think that maybe God could have created creatures that mixed chemicals and created fire. We have people that breathe fire. They put some chemicals in their mouth and then breathe it out, and it's fire. We just saw one of those just about a month ago at one of the fairs, a guy doing fire breathing. So it's very possible that God maybe created creatures that actually breathe fire. That's what it sounds like from the book of Job. Here is the word for Leviathan from the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. Says Leviathan means sea monster, dragon, some kind of large aquatic creature, perhaps the extinct dinosaur Plesiosaurus. The exact meaning is unknown. Some think this to be a crocodile, but from the description in Job 41, this is patently absurd. It appears to be a large fire-breathing animal of some sort. So anyway, they say the same thing there, basically. So it's very likely that there were actually fire-breathing creatures in past times. It goes on in the description. It says, in his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. You can imagine if a dinosaur suddenly rose up out of the water, just about anybody would be terrified. Even if you're in a pretty large ship, you'd still be terrified, because some of them were pretty big. And we don't know exactly which dinosaur this description would be of, but it definitely sounds like some kind of a dinosaur. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. So nothing you can bring against it is going to avail. No spear, no sword. He esteemeth iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned with him into stubble. Darts are counted as stubble. He laugheth at the shaking of a spear. No, nothing even iron is like straw to him. This is a pretty mighty creature. We have a lot of creatures that are strong nowadays, but we put them in an iron cage and they're contained. But this creature, the iron is like nothing to him. Its underparts are the sharp points of potsherds. It leaves its mark in the mud like a threshing sledge. So as it's crawling through the mud, it's leaving like this, as though a threshing sledge has gone through the mud. It makes the deep boil like a cauldron, and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think the deep had a head of white hair. That's quite a description. The likes of it is not on earth, a creature without fear. It looks on every haughty being. It is king over all that are proud. So this is the most mightiest creature. There's nothing else like it on the whole earth. There's no human being that can look on it without fear. So we have in the Bible a description of some kind of fire-breathing water monster, which is kind of startling in a way, but maybe in past history, maybe it wouldn't have been so startling. every ancient map you look at, basically, has water monsters, like sea monsters of some kind. Obviously, there was a lot of artistic license. The people who were making the maps had probably never seen the sea monsters, and so they were just using their imagination to create them. But apparently, it was well known that there were sea monsters out there in the oceans. Even now, like, there was the Kraken that they thought was a mythological creature that the sailors talked about. And recently, I don't know exactly what date it was, but recently they found out that there's huge giant squids out in the ocean that were probably the source of the stories about the Krakens. So it's very possible that in past ages that there was huge dinosaurs still living out in the oceans that people were seeing, that the sailors saw, and there's a lot of stories all through history. There's stories about these creatures. We'll probably have a question and answer time at the end. So I think that the creation versus evolution is a very important topic. I think it's part of the gospel for the last days. And so I'm going to show where I think that this is found in the gospel. This is a familiar verse. It says that, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. That's another definition for uniformitarianism. You probably maybe heard that in evolutionary circles. They think that everything is continued the same as it all has been since the beginning. And it says that in the last days there's going to be scoffers that are coming and saying this. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So they're willingly ignorant that God created the world, and they're willingly ignorant about the flood happening. And it says that this is specifically something that's going to happen in the last days of Earth's history. All through time, just about every nation has worshipped God or gods of some kind. There's hardly ever been a nation, hardly ever been a people group that didn't have some gods that they worshiped. So for people to say they believe in no God, that's kind of a new thing. That's something that's not been around forever. And it's something that's been happening just in the last 100, 200 years that this has really become a big thing. This is the map of the percentage of atheists per country. So you can see some of those countries are 93% atheist. That's like almost every single person in the entire country doesn't believe in God. America's not quite as high, but it's getting kind of dark there too. So the Bible said that this was going to happen in the last days. And it's appearing that this is now happening. This is one of the signs of the end that we're seeing happening all around us right now. So many Christians that believe that we're living at the time of the end of Earth's history and the prophetic signs are being fulfilled around us. We're seeing wars, famines, disease, different things like that. A lot of that's been happening very recently. But the Bible says, Jesus said, when you see all these things, he says, but the end is not yet. These aren't the very last things that are going to happen. The very last sign that he talked about, he said, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So that's the very last sign. So that we're looking for this gospel of the kingdom to go to the whole world. So the question is, where can we find a further description of this final sign? And it talks about it in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. Many people consider the book of Revelation to be the book for the last days, kind of. And so Jesus talked about in Matthew 24 the gospel going to the whole world. And then here in Revelation it says, this is the first angel, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel. So there we have the gospel being talked about, to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. That phrase, every nation, in Greek is the same word that Jesus used back in Matthew 24. And this is the message of the angel. He says, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. So this is the message. This is the everlasting gospel that's been going to the whole world. So it's composed of several different parts here. Fear God and give glory to him. The hour of his judgment is come. We could spend a lot of time studying those, but I just want to focus on the last one. Worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. So this is kind of having to do with the topic that we're on today. So the book of Revelation has more quotes in it from the Old Testament than any other book of the Bible. And many of the quotes in the New Testament seem to come from the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew. The Jewish people before Christ's time, they translated the Bible from Hebrew into Greek. And a lot of the quotes that Jesus and his apostles quote from, it seems like they're quoting from that translation. So this is actually one of the phrases from the Old Testament, worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And it comes from the fourth commandment in Exodus 20:11. That's the exact wording from the Septuagint in the fourth commandment. Here's a little chart. I looked it up and pasted the two phrases together there. So you can see there's 11 words quoted out of the Septuagint from the fourth commandment in the first angel's message in Revelation. And so, of course, the fourth commandment is about the seventh-day Sabbath. And the seventh-day Sabbath, it's a memorial of the Creator. It's pointing back to the 6 days of creation, and it's a reminder of the Creator. Remember, in Revelation, we're talking about end-time type stuff, and at the end of time, people are going to forget the Creator. So that's part of the gospel for the end times, is to bring them back to the Creator. So it's a reminder that creation was 6 literal days. Like some people want to make creation be millions of years. Each day represent millions of years worth of time. And the fourth commandment, it treats it as though it was literal 6 days. It wasn't some symbolic, spiritualized type of thing that fits with evolution. You can't make creation weak into millions and millions of years. It was 6 literal days of creation. And we know that the other commandments, they're literal. They're not symbolic. It's not, well, symbolically don't murder people, or symbolically don't steal. But we have all the commandments are literal, so the seventh day would also be a literal day pointing to literal 6 days of creation. So we have in Revelation, the big controversy in Revelation is worship of the Creator versus worship of the beast. And so creation versus evolution is part of Earth's last great conflict. This is part of the everlasting gospel that is going to the world, that people need to know that God was their Creator. They're supposed to worship the Creator. They're not worshiping... basically, evolution is Satan's attempt to take away the worship of the Creator. And so it's an important thing for the end of time. And I know some of you are parents, and so you have the most challenging job because you're training the next generation of young people how they're going to be thinking and how they're going to be relating to life. And you're preparing your children not to be brainwashed once they're out in the world. But the important thing is true science is on our side. So I'm going to just go through a few discoveries in science, a few recent things. Some of you may have heard of some of these. The dinosaur soft tissue is one that's really fascinating to me. Back in 1996, or I can't remember exactly what year it was, they were excavating a T-Rex skeleton. One of the bones broke, and one of the scientists that was working there asked to take part of it for laboratory testing. She put it in an acid that would dissolve away the bone, and once the bone was gone, she found out that there was still dinosaur soft tissue inside the bone. That looks like steak or chicken or something like that. That was inside the bone of the T-Rex. Here's more pictures. Those are red blood cells up at the top there. More red blood cells here. These are pieces of vein. I'm not sure what all these are. Different parts of the bone. Bone cells up at the top there. So this is, at first the other scientists ridiculed her and they said that's impossible. They said, we know that these bones are, I think that particular one they thought was 100 and something million years old. So they said, we know that soft tissue can't last that long. We know how quickly soft tissue degrades, that this kind of material can't last millions of years. So they said, that's not what, it must be some other byproduct of like bacteria or something. And so she proved, finally she'd done enough testing, she proved it was the soft tissue from the dinosaurs. And so now they're trying to scramble to come up with answers of how they won't let go of the millions of years. So they're trying to figure out how to explain how this could possibly still exist, still having blood cells and soft tissue, like on the videos, like the soft tissue is stretchy and it's like meat basically of the dinosaur. So they're struggling now. They've come up with a few hypotheses, but when you study their hypothesis, it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't explain how it could be millions of years old. So basically, this is proof that the soft tissue, the dinosaurs, still have soft tissue from only a few thousand years ago when the flood happened. It's surprising it would last that long, but that's more reasonable than millions of years. Dr. Mark Armitage, he's one of the people who believes in the Bible. He's a scientist who believes in the Bible, and he's been doing a lot of research on this. The Dinosaur Soft Tissue Research Institute. He got fired from his job at a big university when he was taking electron micrograph photos of the bone cells inside the dinosaur bones, and he published a paper in a scientific journal, and immediately he lost his job. They fired him, not because he had done bad science, but because he believed in creation, and this proved creation. So now he's working, he started a ministry, they're doing research, and these are nerves from dinosaurs. They've been finding all sorts of different things. They've even found some DNA, but it's too broken apart to clone. Everybody wants to know if they can clone the dinosaurs yet. So far, that's not possible, but the thing is that they know how quickly DNA breaks down, and if these are millions of years old, there shouldn't be any DNA in it. But there is still DNA, so that's another proof that if they're not millions of years old. So this is a link here. You can get that link, and it'll give you all the research papers that have been published on dinosaur soft tissue. There's some scientists, I think they're from the Answers in Genesis. I can't remember which ministry they're from, but they're scientists that are keeping a record of all the scientific discoveries that have been published on dinosaur soft tissue. There's 116 research papers. 58 of those are about dinosaur remains, and 27 of them are in the past 5 years alone. So this is a pretty recent discovery. So you can take a picture of that link if you want to go see that research paper, or that list of research papers. So dinosaur soft tissue is very strong evidence that the fossils are recent, they're not millions of years old. Another really interesting thing is called genetic entropy. That's kind of a big term, but it's this guy named Dr. John Sanford. He's been doing a lot of research on this. He wrote this book here called Genetic Entropy. He's a plant geneticist. He's the inventor of the gene gun. The gene gun is what they use for genetic engineering, to insert genes from one species into another species. I don't like that kind of thing, but you can tell what kind of brilliant scientist this guy is. He's the inventor of this gene gun. He served at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Cornell University, Duke University. He received the Distinguished Inventor Award. He's the author of Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome. So this guy is very, very intelligent when you watch his videos. If you watch the ones where he's talking to scientists, it's just like you can't even understand what he's talking about. But he's a brilliant scientist, and so he believes in the Bible, he believes in creation, he believes that the earth is only 6,000 years old, like the Bible says. And so basically, the word entropy means gradual decline into disorder. That's what we see all around us. Everything is declining into disorder. It's the second law of thermodynamics, that everything is winding down. Yeah.
The earth is only as old as 6,000 years?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence pointing to that.
How can it be dinosaurs from millions of years ago?
Well, that's what the dinosaur soft tissue is showing, that they're not millions of years old, that the scientists have been mistaken in thinking that they were, that they're actually only thousands of years old instead of millions of years old. So basically, everything is winding down. Anything that's not maintained is going to deteriorate. That's an obvious thing that we see all around us. And so if things are winding down, that must mean at one time they were wound up. And just like a clock, if it was wound up, somebody had to wind it. Like, it can't be wound up with nobody winding it. So genetic entropy is the slow degradation of the genome. DNA is information. And so basically, anytime you're copying information over and over and over, you start to get defects in the information that's being copied. So it's kind of like if you take a document and you put it through a copy machine over and over, it'll start to get worse and worse and worse if you keep copying the copies and copying the copies. And that's basically what's happening in the genome of every creature on the planet, including humans. As you copy it over and over again, more and more mutations build up, more and more defects come in. And so basically, our genetic material in our bodies and every creature on the planet, it's degrading over time. That's what genetic entropy is. And so basically, the conclusion is that we're all headed for extinction if Jesus didn't come soon. We believe Jesus is coming, and that's the only hope we have. Otherwise, every creature on the planet is headed for extinction because their genetics are slowly degrading over time. And that means if they're degrading, that means at one time they were perfect, and somebody must have wound the clock up at one time, which we know was God. He was the one that created it all. This is an example. The human H1N1 influenza virus, it has disappeared now because of genetic entropy. So they did a bunch of studies on this. They checked it at different samples they had from different times throughout history. And so it disappeared in 2009. It had accumulated over 1,400 point mutations. I'm not sure what all that technological language means, but basically this virus went extinct because too many mutations had accumulated. And other viruses, bacteria, different things are headed for extinction. Humans are headed for extinction. This is what the Bible says would happen. It says, the earth shall wax old like a garment, and they that dwell therein shall die in like manner. So that's the second law of thermodynamics in the Bible. It's a very simple description that everything is slowly degrading over time, and Christ is coming. That's what we have to look forward to. Otherwise, we have no hope of anything because we're all headed for extinction. But Jesus is coming, and so that's our hope because He's the Creator. He can renew everything. That's why worship of the Creator is so important, because that's what we need more than anything at this time in history. So I choose to trust the Bible, partly because science is always changing. It's nothing solid you can trust in. This is a quote from a scientist. She says, as a scientist, it's a constant game of coming up with hypotheses and waiting for someone to prove you wrong. That's the great thing about science. That's why it's so much fun. She said, it's always changing. And that's true. Like, you look at one textbook, it'll say one thing. You look at the next one published 10 years later and says something totally different. And you see constant news headlines saying the scientists had to refigure their dating, like when this creature came or how long this happened because of some new discovery. They're constantly having to revise their theories. It's always changing, and they don't mind that. But if I'm going to base my life on something solid, I want something really solid. The Bible hasn't changed. We have 25,000 archaeological sites that confirm the Bible. We have 24,000 handwritten manuscripts of the New Testament alone, plus hundreds of Old Testament manuscripts. And the church writers from the first 3 centuries quoted over 86,000 times. They quoted the New Testament verses over 86,000 times in their commentaries and letters. So we have different writings by the early church writers. And if we lost the entire Bible, we could reconstruct 99.96% of the New Testament just from their writings. So we have all the manuscripts, plus we have all the writings that quote the Bible. So we have plenty of evidence that the Bible, we have manuscripts going, like fragments of them going almost back to the time when they were written. And then we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, of course. So we have a lot of solid evidence that the Bible is trustworthy, and that's a safe place we can put our confidence. And science is backing up the Bible. True science, true interpretation of the evidence is backing up the Bible. So these are some resources. You can just snap a picture with your phone if you want to. These are some of our favorite ministries. A lot of them have scientists working with them that are Christians, that are doing investigation, they're doing research, gathering data to show that the Bible is accurate. And God did create the world just like the Bible says. And there again is our website and our email address if you want to contact us for anything. if you want more information, or if you want us to come and do like a workshop or anything like that. So is there any questions or anything? Yeah, do you have a question?
How do people know that the Bible is real?
Well, there's a lot of evidence from history, from archaeology. When they dig in the ground, they find a lot of artifacts that show that the Bible is real. They're finding a lot of science that shows the Bible is real.
There's probably not a lot of books that go way back.
Yeah, there's not a lot of books that are that old and have been copied that much. It's obviously all through history people have felt like the Bible is really, really important, and a lot of people have discovered that the Bible is a source of truth and that we can base our lives on it. I got some artifacts downstairs if you want to see some Bible artifacts that were dug up that are talked about in the Bible. Any other questions or anything? Yeah?
Isn't it like, Noah in the Ark?
Mm-hmm.
Where it says each animal,
Mm-hmm.
dogs and stuff? And you know how you said about the printing? What if it's been so long that tells you got wolves and different breeds of dogs?
Yeah, I think that's true. That all the different canines kind of spread out, and they started differentiating into different kinds of species and things. But they all came from an original canine species. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and hope you found this to be interesting.
Or very interesting.